Hello, and welcome to our YouTube channel. I'm Karina Balbo, Managing Director of My Language Hub. We're a language service company providing translation and education services. Our education department specializes in language tuition and professional training for translators, for future translators. In this episode, I interview John Worne, the CEO of the Chartered Institute of Linguists. In this interview, we talk about CIOL's new professional qualification, the Certificate in Translation, or CertTrans for short. We also discuss the differences between the CertTrans and the DipTrans, the Diploma in Translation, and what it takes to succeed in these exams. So without further ado, John Worne. Hello, John. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview with me to talk about the new CIOLQ qualification, the CertTrans or Certificate in Translation, and also to talk about and draw some comparisons with the existing one, which is the Diploma in Translation, the DipTrans. So the John, the DipTrans has been around for quite a while. It has become a well-established and prestigious qualification. So what's been the rationale behind the creation of the CertTrans?
Well, look, first of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me, Karine. It's really nice to talk to you about our qualifications. I mean, as you say, the DipTrans has been around for over 30 years. It's taken in 30 countries around the world, typically in most years that we offer it, and it is very well established. I mean, we like to think of it as the gold standard for translators. And I think that in a way is the reason why we started to think about the certificate in translation, because of course everybody has to start a career somewhere, and increasingly these days people start a career at different ages and stages. So the classic way that qualifications might work would be thinking about someone maybe coming out of university with an undergraduate degree, but of course many people start to use their languages later in life, or pick up a career after having a family, or indeed sometimes choose to use their languages in their retirement. So there's a whole range of times when people might want to diversify and use their language skills. And we thought that a qualification which was absolutely to a working level, so this is a degree level qualification, but was a little more accessible than the DipTrans, because the DipTrans is famously difficult, as you know. A qualification like the CertTrans could help to get more people using their language skills and building their careers. And of course, if you've been successful with the CertTrans and you start to do more translation work, then you'd have a much, much better chance of being successful in the DipTrans, which would be a real personal achievement.
Lovely, thank you. And now the CertTrans as a new qualification, how has the value of this new qualification been communicated among possible stakeholders, though, for example, agencies know about this new qualification, or employers? How?
Well, it's very new, of course, so there's always more to do. But the very good news is that we've had really positive support from a number of different stakeholders. So the Association of Translation Companies, the ATC, have endorsed the CertTrans and have recommended it to their language service companies. So we did a joint press release with them on Slater.com a couple of weeks ago. So that was very positive. We're very grateful to them. We've also had positive support from other stakeholders, and we've had really positive feedback actually from central government. So we've spoken to a number of parts of government, all of whom are interested in the CertTrans. So I think there's a general feeling that a degree level 6 qualification for translators is a really valuable thing to have. Previously, as you know, the DipTrans, which is master's level, was in effect the only qualification that was out there. This now, I think, gives people a first step and a second step. So I think it really will help, and it's been very well welcomed.
Mm-hmm. Now that you mentioned the DipTrans, again, can you briefly describe the differences between the CertTrans and the DipTrans? I mean, you mentioned that the CertTrans is a level 6,
Yes.
sort of equivalent to bachelor's degree, and the DipTrans to master's degree or level 7. But what are other differences?
Well, other differences, one of them is a 3-unit structure. So the DipTrans has 3 units. You take a general paper and then 2 semi-specialized papers, which we can talk a little bit more about in a minute. The CertTrans is a 2-unit qualification, so a general paper, and then either a paper in translation in the context of business or translation in the context of government and public services. So it's 2 units only. So that's the first thing. It's a little bit shorter and smaller qualification. Also, in terms of the texts that people will be translating, the texts for the CertTrans will be a little less specialised than the text for the DipTrans, and a little less difficult in some respects than the text for the DipTrans. And then in terms of the marking, there is slightly more tolerance for some slight mistakes and errors in the marking of the CertTrans, whereas the standard for the DipTrans is very high, because we're looking for something that's substantially ready for publication. So there's a little bit more flexibility in the mark criteria for the CertTrans. And then for people who are familiar with the Common European Framework of Reference, the CEFR, a simple way to think about it is that the CertTrans is more or less leveled at C1, and the DipTrans is more or less leveled towards C2. So there's a sort of a difference in the leveling of them. So as you say, one, the DipTrans is level 7, master's equivalent, ready for publication, 3 units, tough marking. CertTrans is 2 units, C1 level, and a little bit more flexibility in the marking to allow for some errors and omissions.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of hours of study, would you say, is there any difference?
Yeah, the big thing is hours of study. The tricky thing in calculating hours of study is understanding someone's level at the outset. So, if somebody is already a bilingual speaker, or somebody already has a university degree, then the hours of study they're going to need are fewer. But I think we have to be very clear with people. The certificate in translation is a qualification which prepares you for work, and it is going to be challenging and stretching. So if somebody has, a sort of a modern languages degree and has not done any study of translation theory, hasn't read the study guides, and hasn't really done some work on their vocabulary sets and done some practice translation, they are not going to be successful in the CertTrans. This is a professional qualification, so people will need to put in preparation. And will need to achieve a standard. We're not talking about a what sometimes is called a sort of a précis or a gist or the general sense of a text. We're talking about a correct and accurate translation that properly deals with register, tone, and vocabulary. So people will need to put some preparation in.
We'll talk about preparation later on, but
Yes.
before we move on, we've just read that the diploma in translation and DipTrans has added a new paper to Unit 3.
Yes.
The arts and culture.
Yes.
Now this paper seems to be quite niche, and why has this paper been added? Has there been any demand for it, or?
Yes, well, we did some candidate research towards the end of last calendar year, and we asked people against a variety of different additional semi-specialized units that we could potentially create, how they would rate and how they would rank them in terms of units that they would like to see or like to take. And the arts and culture one came through very, very strongly. So we were delighted to see that and delighted to offer it. If you were to ask me why I think that is the case, I think partly it's because if you think about arts organizations, museums, galleries, music, there is a lot of exchange between the UK and Europe, and then there's an enormous amount of exchange between European countries in the cultural sector. And, in many ways, it combines something which is both an interest for people because they're interested in the arts and culture, but it also provides quite a lot of employment opportunities because there are well-funded institutions, museums, galleries, and then, of course, on the commercial side of the arts, with music, film, etc., where there's real demand. So if you were to ask me honestly, Karina, was I expecting that to be the number one choice out of the market research? Probably not. But I guess that shows you the value of doing market research because sometimes you find some things that you weren't expecting. So
Absolutely.
we found it in the candidate survey and we thought, let's do it.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you. And sometimes future candidates ask us where they can find samples of papers. Can candidates now find samples of papers for the arts and culture paper?
We will start to add them. We don't have an enormous back catalogue at this point in time. So we have a description of the sorts of things that you might expect. So on the website, there is a list of the sorts of things. But it's a good point. And I think more past papers and more content is always what people are asking us for, because it's the opportunity to practice. So we can definitely have a look at improving access to past papers. Now, this is also true for the CertTrans. We have a sample text on the website, which people can see, but I know that people will want more sample text and more practice materials. We'll come on to it, but this is also one of the things that will be helpful with course providers, because course providers will be very well aware of what a level 6 and a level 7 standard text is, and I think can really help candidates with giving them the sorts of text that they're going to need. I'll just tell you one of the small challenges that we have with this, and that's copyright texts. So we have to be a little bit careful about sharing copyright texts. So that's one of the things that we're working on, to have a bigger selection of texts which aren't copyrighted, so that we can share them with candidates.
Thank you. Sometimes we have potential candidates with a certain level of 2 or more languages inquiring for the diploma in translation, for the DipTrans. Would you think that, would the DipTrans be the right qualification for them, or maybe would you persuade them probably to take the CertTrans instead? What do you think?
I think that's a very good question, Karina, and one I think we had in mind when we were thinking about the CertTrans, that people who have 3 or 4 languages, particularly if they have a prime language and then they have other languages from the same language family, so Slavic languages or certain of the other language, Romance languages, then people very often want to add a second or a third language. And I do genuinely think the CertTrans is ideal for that, because it's it gives people an opportunity to demonstrate that, add that string to their bow, and I think it's perfect for further languages. That's not to say it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's perfect for that task. And of course, I wouldn't ever want to discourage someone from taking the DipTrans, because it's a real achievement to get it. But I do think that the CertTrans is an excellent solution for 3rd, 4th, and 5th languages.
Great. Now, this also the DipTrans has been famous for being a quite difficult or challenging exam to pass.
Yes.
Why do you think is the case? Well, what advice would you give to potential candidates?
Well, we have tightened up a little bit on the website, the description, to make it a little bit clearer that it is challenging. And in some of the social media that we do, we do that. And that's not because we're enjoying making it hard. It's just because ultimately, as you will know, as a language professional, the standard is what the standard is, and what people are looking for from a top flight professional translator is a very, very high level. It's an outstanding level of linguistic ability. And not just that, it's also respecting the norms and conventions of translation. So it is important, and there's an enormous amount of nuance in it. And it's it's a work of art, isn't it? A high quality translation. So I think the way I sort of think of it is the DipTrans is like the concert pianist. It is a high level qualification. You can be incredibly proud if you've got it. It's perfectly possible to get it. Plenty of people do pass it, but it is a true and difficult test of excellent ability. And that's why it has the standing that it has. So we will absolutely, we don't look to fail people. That's the last thing we want to do. We want people to progress and become members, hopefully, of the Chartered Institute of Linguists and have language careers. But the DipTrans does set a stretching standard, and that's exactly why I think the CertTrans is a great addition, because it's creating something which absolutely gets people into the world of work, uses those supplementary languages for people who've got several, and also provides the stepping stone to the DipTrans. I think the most tragic case is someone who hasn't understood what translation is. Someone, for example, who has recently passed a language degree, an undergraduate degree, and with very little preparation and no course, puts themselves in for the DipTrans. And in an ideal world, you would say to people, that's not, you're not likely to be successful if what you have is a language degree and no practice in translation. It's not the thing for you.
Yes, thank you. Now, there are also candidates who come to us and they haven't decided whether it's good for them to do a BA or an MA in translation, yes, a university degree in translation, or take a preparatory course and do the exam at a later stage. What would you say to them? What differences can you see between a university degree and a prep course plus exam?
Well, look, I mean, I would say that there's, to do a university degree in a modern language is a wonderful thing. To do a master's in translation or in interpreting is also a wonderful thing. The obvious differences, basically what a university degree or a master's course is doing is, yes, to some extent testing your ability as a linguist, but it's also asking you to do much, much more than that. It's asking you to develop and demonstrate independent study. It's asking you to develop and demonstrate skills and tools of argument. It's asking you to understand a whole discipline, all of the things that hang around a subject. And in the case of a master's, it's often asking you to do something like produce a dissertation or a piece of independent research. So the thing is that really it's about demonstrating your academic credentials, and it's about demonstrating your ability to study and master a discipline. And that's slightly different from demonstrating that you have outstanding language skills. So, if we were to imagine this in terms of almost like taking a driving test tests whether you can drive a car. But if you were doing a degree in driving, you would learn about the history of cars, the structure of cars, the making of cars, why cars are important in the modern world, how cars work. So there will be all sorts of other things that you would be learning, which would be fascinating. But the fundamental thing that we're wanting to test is, can you drive the car? And I think this is the thing with with professional qualifications. They're about testing whether you can confirm that you have the specific skill, so that an employer can be confident that you can do what they need you to do. Think of an accountancy exam. Think of a law practice exam. Think of any of the sorts of classic professional qualifications, and that's the difference. So in the same way as I would say it's a fantastic thing to do a law degree, but a law degree doesn't qualify you to stand in a UK court. You need to have a different set of skills to have that license to operate. So there is an overlap between the two. I think it's really about whether you want to study everything that is around languages, culture, and the discipline, or whether you're more focused in your needs and you want to demonstrate outstanding language skills for the purposes of building and having a career. The one thing I would say over and above that is, and this is something that we consciously thought about in the development of the CertTrans, I think, can really help people to go from undergraduate level languages, do some study, maybe do some courses and preparation, achieve the CertTrans, and that could be a really nice route into then doing a master's. So I think the other thing about CertTrans is one of the catastrophic things that happens, certainly in the UK, is that lots of people do language degrees and then never use their languages again. So what we're trying to do with the CertTrans is catch more of those people who leave university with language skills and then drop out of the system. And if the CertTrans can catch some of those people and then lift them towards either a master's or the DipTrans, then that would be, you know, a really wonderful thing. Sort of catch a flying comet, if you like, and get propelled into the world of linguists. Because at the moment, so many people just sort of fall to earth and you know, never use their languages again.
And we do need linguists, don't we?
Desperately, this country needs them more than ever, and the world needs them. You know, where linguists make the world go round.
Yeah. Do you think that would you advise people to a candidate to go for a preparation course for the CertTrans?
Look, I have to say, if you can afford it, yes. I mean, again, I know you shouldn't stretch the metaphor too far, but you know, like a driving test, I just think it makes all the difference in the world to have some, you know, to sit with a professional and have some lessons. So I think if a person can afford it, you know, there are some rules of the road with translation that, you know, it's really important to learn. And of course, you can learn them from a book. Of course, you can find online resources which will point them out, and we offer a study guide. But I think talking to you know, an established professional and particularly someone who is running a course is incredibly valuable. And then there's the mentoring and the support and the tips and tricks around exam practice that you would get in a course. So I think if people can afford it in terms of time and money, it will really help them. But you know, we have designed the materials and the qualification so that a person could be able to achieve it with self-study alone. So you know, we absolutely don't mandate a course, but I do think courses are incredibly helpful if people can afford them.
And to guide those who are watching us and into a good preparation course, what, in your opinion, what a good preparation course should include?
Well, I think, you know, a bit of translation theory, a good degree of practice, and I think, you know, it's worth looking at the mentoring aspects of it as well, in terms of you know, someone who has done this kind of work. I think, you know, we are. I mean, there's no reason that someone shouldn't take the CertTrans or indeed the DipTrans for, you know, their own interests or their own personal development. But most people will be taking it because they want to work as a linguist. And I think it helps to be connected and to learn from someone who has done professional translation. I do think that that is good. So those would be the sorts of things I would look for: a bit of theory, lots and lots of practical content and practice, and then, you know, the mentorship of someone who you know, has that experience and can tell you something about the wider aspects of what it is to be a working linguist.
Lovely, thank you. Now, the CertTrans as well as the DipTrans are online exams. Have they
Yes.
been the DipTrans used to be also in person. Is there any chance that they will go back in person, or they will stay online for the foreseeable
I
future?
think our expectation is that they'll stay online for the foreseeable future. And, you know, this is based again on candidate research. You know, what we found was, you know, perhaps in the first one or two rounds of remote assessment, people, you know, took a little bit of getting used to it. But I think, given what's happened in the last 2 years with the pandemic, everyone has become so used to online, and of course, so much of what many people do in translation work is remote and online. That, in actual fact, people have taken to it very, very well. So certainly, if we look at our candidate surveys, we find a very, very high level of satisfaction with taking the course online, and it just means it's much more practical for many people to not have to travel to a centre, and also, to some extent, helps them with anxiety for many people, because there's always that anxiety when you're traveling somewhere. Will the train be late? Will I be able to get there? So I think for a lot of people, it takes some of the anxiety out of the question as well. The one thing that I would say that online assessment does bring is a little bit of stress and anxiety around the setup of your computer and systems. So we do offer some demos, and we do offer quite a lot of candidate guidance on how to make sure that your setup will work appropriately with the live assessment software, because we also have remote invigilation. So that all of these things have to work. There's nothing complicated about it. It works on almost any PC, but it doesn't work on iPhones or iPads, which sometimes people have wanted to use. And it is wise for people to go through the systems checks and make sure that their setup is correct. And they have Chrome, for example, which is what we recommend. So that is worth a little bit of time, just so that on the day you're not creating anxiety for yourself. But we do provide lots of support on the day as well. And the overwhelming majority of people get online and find it very, very straightforward to do the test.
Thank you. Now, one of the questions, and this is probably the burning question we normally get from candidates. They say, Karina, the exam is online. Why is it that we can't use online resources or Google search or things like that? Can you expand a little bit on that, please?
Yes, I can. This is a really tricky one. And basically, what it comes down to is fairness. So if you look at the quality of online resources and how they vary across different languages, so given the amount of investment and the amount of content that exists on the internet in English, then tools and resources to support translation into English are infinitely better than they are for some less popular languages, or languages which have got less investment behind them. So in effect, if you allowed people to use those tools, you would have real benefits for some languages and real disbenefits for other languages. So that's one of the significant reasons. The other reason is that this is a regulated qualification. So, we are required to follow, a certain number of rules in order to have it regulated. And there are, a number of anxieties about having access to electronic devices. So, we encourage people not to have mobile phones, all sorts of things in off-qual qualifications you're encouraged not to have. And for the invigilation, to make sure there is no cheating, also people have to be on camera and visible and not using other devices. So some of it is around the rules and regulations of off-qual, but setting that aside, I think the biggest reason is the fairness reason in terms of comparison across languages. So you lose a little bit in terms of comparability with the day job of an actual translator, because an actual translator will likely be using tools, but what you gain is a fairness and comparison across all the language families. And in a sense, what sits underneath all of these qualifications is a test of your linguistic ability. So we think, on balance, it's the fairest way of doing it.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, it's very, very clear. Now let's go more, being specific about the CertTrans now. What types of text should candidates expect to translate during the exam?
Yeah, look, we there is a sample text, as I say, on the website, which is an example of a sort of a popular science write-up of a not enormously technical context. So I think, these are the sorts of things that I think we can expect. So there'll be things that to do with current affairs, with news, with science, but avoiding very, very complex and specific terminology, and culture. So a broad range of topics, but I think the critical thing is that we would not expect there to be very specific terminology or vocabulary that is highly related to a semi-specialized discipline. Whereas if you were to think about what you would get in the DipTrans, in the semi-specialized papers where you have business, technology, arts and science, arts and culture, there you would expect to find vocabulary and terminology which is more specific to the domain. So I think we're looking for things which are to do with contemporary life, contemporary news, current affairs, science, culture, entertainment, but we're not expecting to see very unusual or complicated terminology or vocabulary in there. And then in terms of lengths, they're about 500 words.
Lovely. And then that's 500 words, and that's both for Unit 1 and Unit 2 or Unit 3?
There or thereabouts, yes. They're all similar sorts of lengths.
Lovely. That's all from me. Thank you very much, John.
Look, it's a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to interview you and to discuss the CertTrans and the DipTrans as well. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is that, as you know, Karina, the purpose of the Chartered Institute of Linguists is to promote, develop, and support linguists. So, the only reason we do this is for those reasons. So it's always great to talk to you, and be very happy to come back and talk again, because feedback that you get from people, the people you see on your courses and the people in your network, helps us to make these qualifications better and help more people get into the industry. And it's, as you say, so important to do that, because it's a vital thing that linguists do. We do create a connection between cultures. So it's what we're here for. Happy to come on and see you again anytime in the future. And by all means, tell us what your candidates think of it. I hope many of them will give it a try in November, and it'll get better and better with the feedback that you give us.
Oh, one more question regarding November. So the CertTrans is now the date for the first CertTrans exam is November.
Yes, that's right.
The diploma in translation has 2 dates, one in January and one in July.
Yes.
Do you think that the CertTrans will have another date?
We'll take a look at it based on the November session, but I would be optimistic. Yes, I think if the November session is as popular as we hope and expect it will be, then I would be optimistic for a second session in the spring. But we'll just wait and see based on candidate numbers and candidate feedback. But certainly, the expectation for the CertTrans is it should be a qualification that a lot of people want to take.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, and by the way, just to say that we're very open to and plan more languages in the future. So at the moment, the CertTrans is French, German, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, but we are very, very open to other languages in the future. So this is just the beginning.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you very much, John.
Great stuff. See you again soon, Karina.
See you soon.
Best.